recording. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. My name is Sweeney D'Souza and I'm the Partner Success Lead at the DMZ. We're very glad that you could join us here today for the SR&ED webinar, and we have experts here from ThinkShred, which is one of the reputable Canadian organizations that has helped so many tech founders from the DMZ and outside as well get their tax refunds for the SR&ED program. And what we're going to do today is talk at a very basic level about what this program is, introduce it to founders. This is something that every tech founder should be aware of and definitely take advantage of. So first of all, thank you, John Paul and Darren from ThinkShred for being here with us today. You can wave hi to our audience. And we are working with John Paul and Darren in the Professionals in Residence program, or the PIR program at the DMZ. And through this program, the DMZ startups and the RU zone startups, or the Ryerson zone startups, have free access to chat with our experts pro bono during their weekly office hours. You can book meetings. If you would like to do so, please get in touch with your program lead or with me directly. I'm available on Slack or by email, and I can help set this up for you. And after that, if you do decide to retain them, they also have special rates that they can give you and extend to you because you're part of the DMZ family. And JP has worked with our founders now for close to a year and has a 100% success rate with every founder that he submitted a tax return for. So I would say definitely you guys are in good hands. And now I will pass it on to JP and Darren to maybe do a quick intro to themselves, and then we can get started.
Thanks, Sweeney. I feel like I've been watching too much CNN lately, and I should be like John Paul reporting from the White House or something like. Anyways, that's just came over me all of a sudden right now. But thank you very much, Sweeney. Both Darren and I are very happy to take every opportunity we can to connect with the DMZ family, the founders, yourselves. It really is a privilege for us to be able to connect with such an amazing group. As Sweeney mentioned, we've had the opportunity to work with a number of companies now coming through the DMZ Accelerator Program, Incubator Program, and beyond into the legal zone. And so it's been awesome, really. I think before we get into the nitty-gritty with SR&ED, I should just expand on what Sweeney mentioned about the PIR program. Not only is it awesome to be able to work with the DMZ founders, but we couldn't have been more fortunate, really, to have found ourselves with such an amazing team that they have vetted and assembled through the PIR program. So again, with SR&ED working so closely with accountants and beyond, we've had a lot of experience now working with the other PIR contributors, from Logan Katz to Goodmans and Faskin, so on. And it's been awesome. So I would encourage you to broaden your scope, if you haven't already, from just ThinkShred in this moment to all of the resources that the DMZ offers, and in our case, specifically within the PIR. So definitely a lot of value, a lot of opportunity for collaboration there. And that's my thought on that. So definitely check out the other PIR contributors as well. Today, we are, for the next 30 minutes or so, we are going to talk about everyone's favorite tax incentive program, the SR&ED program. So what the #1 goal of today is to be educational for you, okay? That is the absolute first and foremost goal that we have. And a near second, entertaining, okay? I've been in this game now for 13 years. I've assisted hundreds and hundreds of companies to receive the benefits of the SR&ED program. And that makes me no one more, realizing more so how boring it can be. So we're going to really try to make it entertaining. We're going to try to focus on real world scenarios, how software companies can benefit from this and beyond, you know. So that's, like I said, that's the goal for today: educational, entertaining, and thirdly, interactive. So there is a question and answer period at the end of this. Everyone will have an opportunity to ask a question. If we don't touch on it during the session, ask at the end. However, if you require clarity on something that either I or Darren have said, do not hesitate to send that note out. Sweeney will be moderating as usual, and she can stop us dead in our tracks, and we can address any question that requires clarification. And again, if it's just something that we don't touch on, wait till the end, and we can answer everyone's questions. Okay. So again, my name is John Paul Belanger. I am a member of the leadership team at ThinkShred, and I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague Darren Gillis, another member of the leadership team at Think. So predominantly my role is project management within the organization, whereas Darren is a highly technical individual with more than 20 years experience in software development project management. Okay, so that's our background, and here goes nothing. So today, SR&ED, the ThinkShred way. We are going to talk about 4 different things today. We're going to give you an intro to SR&ED. We are going to talk about how the program is administered. We're going to talk about the submission process, a typical submission process. And then we're going to expand on what Sweeney touched on, and that's some of the results that we've seen from DMZ founders. So that might be even more relatable for you, okay? What is the SR&ED program? So for those of you who have not heard of it or aren't sure exactly, the SR&ED program is a government incentive program rooted in tax law that fosters innovation in Canada. Okay, it's administered by Canada Revenue Agency at a federal and provincial level. So while the net result for Canadian controlled private corporations is a recovery of, or is money in your pocket, rather, I want to make a distinction that this is not a grant. SR&ED is not a grant. A grant typically would imply that there is money that's available to you to move forward with a hiring or a project, okay? This is a recovery of expenditures, okay? So it is a tax incentive program. The program annually pays out approximately $3 billion to 20,000 companies that are operating in Canada. And another distinction I'd like to make is while it is called a tax credit, for a Canadian-controlled private corporation, which the acronym for that is CCPC, you are entitled to a refundable tax credit. So expenditures that you've incurred throughout a fiscal period are refunded to you based on an eligible submission, which is cash, essentially a cash refund to the company. Okay? What is SR&ED? So at the top here where it says define SR&ED, oh, I'm sorry, I cannot move this, I've covered. Anyways, SR&ED is a systematic investigation or search in a field of science or technology by means of experiment or analysis. That is how CRA defines SR&ED, okay? The three areas underneath the definition are how one can apply. Okay, so it would either be basic research, applied research, or experimental development. Now, when I say how one can apply, these would be, the first two fall under the SR in SR&ED, whereas the ED is the ED in SR&ED. So work undertaken for the purpose of advancing science or technology without a specific practical application. This is basic research. That and applied research, it would be very unlikely that any of the founders within the DMZ would fall under scientific research, okay? Even CRA will tell you that over 95% of the submissions they see to the SR&ED program are based on experimental development. This is work undertaken for the purpose of technological advancement by attempting to create a new or incrementally improve upon an existing product or process. Naturally, all of this work would occur amidst your commercial project or a company project, whether it is for commercialization or whether it is for a software project. I'll use software as an example, a software program or project that you are doing for your own internal use, okay, to better your business or to create a more robust company, okay? In many cases, DMZ founders are developing software to go to market, to commercialize. So either one of them is acceptable. But in 99.9% chance, the work you're doing falls under the experimental development portion of SR&ED, okay? What can be claimed through the SR&ED program? So now that we've established that eligible work that makes a taxpayer, and when I say the word taxpayer, I'm referring to any company that is paying subject to Canadian taxes, okay? Not necessarily paying tax. You do not have to be paying tax, okay? You could be operating at a loss, but any taxpayer that is legally operating in Canada is eligible to have these expenditures refunded to them. The approximate amounts based on a Canadian-controlled private corporation who has not exhausted the small business deduction. So if your profits are less than $800,000 a year, the refund that you can expect based on a successful SR&ED submission is 65% of the dedicated payroll, okay? So how does that get translated? If you have $100,000 worth of eligible expenditures, that might be from one person or a number of people, and we determined that of the payroll, of the entire payroll, $100,000 was dedicated to eligible SR&ED activities, 65% of that would be refunded to you. The same activities, if performed by contractors, the refundability is half that, 33% approximately, okay? Now, in the case of software companies that are also developing hardware or manufacturers that are manufacturing, 42% of the value of expenditures that went to wasted materials or transformed materials can also be refunded. So we might describe those as prototypes, okay? As I mentioned, Canada Revenue Agency administers the SR&ED program, and it is administered at a federal level and a provincial level. The federal benefit is referred to the ITC, which is investment tax credit. It makes up the vast majority of the refund that you would realize. Then there is the provincial benefit, which is the Ontario Innovation Tax Credit. And then there is the ORDTC, which is the Ontario Research and Development Tax Credit, okay? If anyone's wondering, how and when do I make an SR&ED submission? The mechanism by which a company makes the SR&ED submission is the corporate tax return. So that tells us that SR&ED is a highly specialized area of tax and accounting, okay? And the way that a company makes the submission is by including the required schedules in the tax return when submitting. Now, do you have to do it when you file the tax return? Not necessarily, but it has to be done with the filing of a tax return. So to make that more clear, if every company is encouraged and obliged to file a tax return, certainly if they're owing tax, within 6 months of the last day of a fiscal year end. So let's keep things simple and look at a company with a calendar year end. December 31st. By March 31st of the following year, the company should have paid any tax that they owe to the government and then filed a tax return 3 months after that, 6 months after the last day of the fiscal year end. So for those of you who have a tax return of December, have a fiscal year end of December 31st, 2020, you have to file a tax return by June 30th. If at some point after that, you realize that there was eligible SR&ED activities, you can amend that tax return for up to 18 months after the last day of the fiscal year end. This December 31st would make for a June 30th, 2022 SR&ED tax filing deadline. After that, even if there's eligible activity, you can never revisit the opportunity. The last thing I'll say about that is you should always and whenever possible make the SR&ED submission with the initial filing of the tax return. The government does let you amend it for up to 1 year after the tax filing deadline, but it is always best whenever possible to file with the tax return. Okay? We're going to look into a more close look at how the program is administered. So understanding that this is a highly specialized area of taxation, we first must need to look to the legislation that governs the SR&ED program. And perhaps I can draw another comparison to what this is not, as mentioned, a grant. It could be that if you're applying for a grant, you don't qualify because of maybe where you're located or various reasons. It could be that they have closed off the program, okay, for that period. That is another area where SR&ED does not match up, okay? If you have performed eligible work, you are legally entitled to receive the benefits. As such, there is no cap on the SR&ED program, okay? Subsection 248-1 of the Income Tax Act stipulates that there are 3 criteria that must be satisfied to make one eligible. The first is that there is technological uncertainty. I'm going to speak in somewhat layperson terms to address this. So what is technological uncertainty? Basically, you could define technological uncertainty or describe it as a gap in the knowledge as it relates to a specific technological or scientific detail or fact, okay? So amidst a company project, you encounter a problem that your company, the experts within your company, and the generally available knowledge base that they would be able to access does not allow them to solve that specific technological or scientific problem. This is when a technical problem would become a technological uncertainty. So an expert wouldn't be expected to know how to resolve that problem, okay? This is technological uncertainty. Technical content is the second criteria, and this is the process by which you try to reduce or eliminate that gap in the knowledge, okay? A term that you might become familiar with is systematic investigation. We'll get into that in the next slide. So you have a technological uncertainty. You systematically try to reduce or eliminate that which you do not know. And on the other side, you generate knowledge. I use the word generate as opposed to acquire knowledge because this program is not about learning through the acquisition of knowledge. It's about learning through the generation of knowledge, okay? Now, can you learn something that someone else already knows and still qualify? Absolutely. Providing that the information is not readily available to you. Someone else, another company or individual could have already achieved what you're looking to, but if they have not published that information in a reasonably accessible way, then you could only be expected to draw the same conclusions through experimentation or analysis, okay? So again, in summary, technological uncertainty is a technical problem that you cannot find the answer to. The systematic investigation or search aimed at reducing or eliminating that which you do not know. And on the other side, the technological advancement is the generation of information and knowledge that you create through that investigation. This is essentially a layperson's explanation to the SR&ED program as described in subsection 248-1. Now, CRA administers the program with 5 questions, currently 5 questions, okay? And this would primarily come up in an audit, which is not an, it's not a forced part of the process. It's not a guaranteed part of the process. It just could be, much in the same way as your personal taxes or corporate tax. An SR&ED submission could be subject to audit, okay? CRA reserves that right. One good thing to know as a Canadian-controlled private corporation being that the benefit that you potentially might realize is a refundable cash benefit. CRA will only audit before the money is awarded. You do not have to be worrisome or at risk of that money being clawed back. If CRA wishes to develop a more of an understanding on the submission, they will do it before the money is awarded to you. Once the money has been awarded to you, it is not subject, through an approval, it is not subject to clawback in the case of a Canadian-controlled private corporation. So the 5 questions that CRA looks to are, again, reminiscent of the criteria, but expanded. Technological uncertainty, we understand what that is, a gap in the knowledge that would be available to a competent professional in their field, okay? The formulation of hypothesis. By identifying that you have formulated a hypothesis, made an educated guess on what the outcome would be, you substantiate that the work is being done by experts who understand and how to presuppose what might happen, okay? The systematic investigation is a term that I used and drew from CRA's eligibility of work for SR&ED investment tax credit policy. This is the process by which you try to reduce or eliminate that which you do not know. And as you reduce what you do not know, you increase what you do know, even if those are a million ways that that your objective cannot be achieved. This program does not reward success. It rewards technological advancement. Without technological uncertainty, there can be no technological advancement. This program is not about coming up to what the industry would be expected to know. It's about trying to push beyond. That's when you have come into SR&ED, okay, versus learning and acquiring knowledge, okay? You have a technological uncertainty. You realize what that is. The information is not available to you. The formulation of a hypothesis. I mean, let's talk plainly here. I think if we do this, this will happen. I got an idea. We're going to test this out. My gut tells me if we do this. These are all hypotheses. You're experts, right? The people who are doing the work are experts. There's a lot of language that's used that represents the hypothesis. The process you go through, the tests, the trials, the iterative journey is the systematic investigation, and the resultant knowledge that comes through that, even if it only has to do with failures that you've realized or the rejection of a hypothesis, is still technological advancement because it eliminates a possible solution. Lastly, CRA always looks for documentation. The specific question they ask is, or they look for is, was a record of the hypothesis and the results kept, was a record of the hypothesis and the results kept as the work progressed. This is no different than if you, in your personal taxes, are going to claim $1,000 of parking receipts. If you get audited, they're going to ask to see those receipts. Okay. So with the only difference with SR&ED is that there is no one method that CRA can impose upon the taxpayer to track SR&ED. So they're open to anything that you've created that can substantiate that the work took place and that the costs associated, were as follows, right? So they're looking for something, and they try to be pretty liberal on how they objectively measure that, okay? philosophies and facts. So when I say philosophies, I guess you could say that it's based on a decade and a half of professional experience, collectively from our leadership team, about 60 years of professional judgment and experience. So a commercial project is not necessarily equal to an SR&ED project. What do I mean by that? When you go to file an SR&ED project submission, you do not talk about your company project. This is the number one surefire way to have your claim audited and denied, because even if there's eligible work in there, you have taken the wrong approach. As described, SR&ED happens when there is technological uncertainty, a systematic investigation aimed at reducing or eliminating that uncertainty, and a generation of knowledge, the technological advancement. This could occur any number of times amidst a company project, or it could be that there are a number of company projects going on and a similar uncertainty that lies within all of those, or a number of them. So you could have data integration issues, performance issues, security issues, and 3 company projects or 4 or more, and you might end up writing one about the work that you did to advance methods within something that touches on all of those. Okay? When does SR&ED happen? Anytime the individuals in a company are generating new knowledge through an iterative journey aimed at reducing or eliminating an identified technological limitation. I've just basically reworded what I've already told you. If the experts in your company are attempting to generate knowledge because they've identified a limitation or a gap in the existing knowledge base that they have access to, it's probable that you're performing eligible SR&ED activity. And what we would encourage you to do is recognize that, or use a company like ThinkShred to help you track that and give you direction as you go through the year, so that you stand the best chance of being successful in your submission. Okay? Presto versus process. I like this one. Much like in the case of creating art, the journey is what makes one piece recognizable when another similar piece is not. It's not the end result. As I said, this is not about success. That's the success is the story you tell your friends over a beer or a coffee, or a colleague who appreciates your work, or your spouse or partner. What we want to talk about is the failures. Why was it so hard? This is not the moment for pride, and this is for humility and looking at all of the challenges that came up and all of the iterations that were required for you to go, we finally made it, or abort. We're not getting anywhere with this. Okay? Supporting activities. Why do I mention this? Well, because eligible activities there are certain eligible activities, right? But then there are other activities that are not eligible until they become commensurate with eligible activities. For example, some of those are engineering, design, research, analysis, testing, data collection, and more. There's actually 8 types of activities that are called supporting activities that become eligible when commensurate with eligible SR&ED activities. Why is that important to you? Well, I kind of describe it like this. This is the way I see it, and I always have in my head. If a fire burning represents eligible activities, pushing a wheelbarrow is not. But what if you're pushing a wheelbarrow full of coal or fire to put into the fire? Well, now it becomes eligible, because without that fuel, the fire goes out. So not only can you claim the expenditures of keeping the fire going, but the individuals that are wheelbarrowing and doing otherwise ineligible tasks to keep that fire going become eligible, and the eligible costs increase, the net benefit to your company goes up. Okay, that's just an analogy that I've used because I always see it that way for some reason.
I'll jump in and talk about this one, John Paul. So I just want to say before I start talking about the slide, you freaked me out at the beginning when you said we have to try and make SR&ED entertaining. I mean, that's a tall order to fill. But before I jump into some of these areas of uncertainty, I just want to say that I've been on your side of the desk for the people that are in the presentation right now. So, you know, being a software developer for many years, the projects that I worked on, the companies I worked for, we had to do SR&ED every year, and it was painful. And we'll get into a little bit about our process and how we aim to make this a little bit less painless. But I just want to let you know that I can share some of your grief if you've been through this process before. But to touch on some of these technological uncertainties, so you know, when we're talking about SR&ED, and the topic can be very dry, and I think up until now, there's been a lot of it. It seems maybe kind of abstract. So we just want to give some examples, you know, and I'll mention too that this is primarily aimed at software. We have met with some founders at DMZ that are dealing with manufacturing or in one case, mechanical engineering. But the primary, you know, bulk of the clients that we've spoken to, or the founders that we've spoken to at DMZ, have been in software. So that's where our focus is with this slide. And as I mentioned, we're trying to sort of get across, you know, what is a technological uncertainty when it comes to software. So there's a couple of examples here. I won't go through every one of them, but you can see from some of these that are listed, like it gets very down close to the metal, right, of software development. So, you know, the last slide sort of touched on commercial versus a technological project. So, you know, it's not based on features necessarily, right? So your project, some of these things you might have like security and encryption, you know, AI, machine learning advancements. These are things that, you know, you're going to do under the covers of your features, right?
Oh, my apologies.
No problem. So an example of something that might not qualify, maybe this is a better way to look at it. So if you have a feature that's simply a data entry form on a screen, you know, in a web-based application, you collect some data, you send that to a back-end API, and then you store that data in some database. If you're just doing that, right, that might fill a lot of needs in terms of your features and data collection. It's not going to fill a lot of needs when it comes to, you know, SR&ED and what would qualify. So something else that might not qualify that's starting to become a little bit more common these days, things like no-code tooling, right? If you're using like some kind of a workflow engine to sort of move data around on the back end, but you're not really touching the code necessarily, you're just working with sort of modules and building blocks on the front end, that wouldn't be the strongest work to focus on either. You know, we try to get into like if you're using libraries or frameworks, are you using them as they were meant to be used, or was there some challenges that were faced because they didn't provide the capabilities that you expected when you started the project? So these are some of the areas that we try to focus on. Again, we try to get under the covers as much as possible. And a couple slides later, we'll talk about the process a little bit.
Thank you, Darren. So here we are. Again, speaking about Think Now as a committed partner to the DMZ through the PIR program, we're grateful and honored to be your preferred SR&ED strategic partner. There are a lot of opportunities for you to get advice in this area. We encourage you to ask questions. There is a lot of misinformation out there. In my personal life, I enjoy fitness and nutrition, and I jokingly say that the only one area I've seen more information you know, floating around other than fitness and nutrition is SR&ED. There are so many things you hear that are not true or sound good, but, you know, could be true because they sound or they're said with such confidence, but aren't. So ask questions. We are here for you anytime. You can reach out to us any number of ways, and there's never too many times you can reach out. Whether it's just advice you're looking for or a quick question, let us know. It's a really unique collective of individuals that came together to form Think Collective and Think SR&ED. And for that reason, we've had a tremendous amount of success. And really what we would encourage you to do is the same thing that we do, is understand the legislation to the extent that you have time or whatever. If this is something you wanted to do on your own, I'm not at all encouraging that. But you know, by understanding the legislation and CRA's policy, you can begin to make a defensible submission. Program compliance is essential, right? If you want to take advantage of this program, there is a minimal level of compliance. By having a company like Think assist you, we can make that process easy. And again, the highest possible benefit is what we're all looking for, right? The right benefit. Okay, you don't want to claim too much in the sense that it's not what you're entitled to. You certainly don't want to claim too little. So by understanding what to claim, you will end up with the right benefit, and that ought to be the highest possible benefit that your company is entitled to.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the process. Like I said, I won't spend a lot of time on this. We're sort of getting close to the end here, but just to quickly go through. So there's 6 points here. Really, the first 4 would be things that we would focus on to get your claim submitted. And then 5 and 6, I'll touch on briefly. So the first 2 meetings, the rummage meeting, this is where we talk about, we get to know your commercial objective, right? What was the commercial project? And we really want to know that just for context. And then we could talk a little bit about your tech stack, but typically this would be with like a product or a project lead where we would have this meeting. The second meeting, then we come back and say, okay, so we sort of understand from some of your features and your commercial objective where some of the technological uncertainties might lie, right? And this abstract meeting might be with more of a technical individual on your team. And this is where we talk about some of those things that we mentioned in the previous slide, security, AI, machine learning, all these things that are, again, closer to the metal. After we get through that, we collect this information as raw materials, is what we like to call them. So the raw materials come from the interview process that we have through these meetings, or if you have any documentation that has already been created. We don't ask you to create any documentation that you don't already have. And the main reason for this is that we aim to do the heavy lifting. So this is where we come to you, give us the raw materials, we'll formulate the narrative that you want to submit for your claim. That meets the eligibility requirements. Third point here, financial request. Obviously, there's costs that are involved, and this is how you get your money back. So we'll work with whoever's looking after the costs, things like salary, contractor costs. We work with that individual to sort of get that information. And then, number 4, the verification and do the actual submission, right? And as we mentioned already in this presentation, it's done with your tax return. It's done once a year according to your fiscal year. 5 and 6, I won't get into a lot, but 5 really is that in the event that CRA ever came back to you to say we need more information before we can award you the tax credits, we work with you to help with that audit support. And number 6, quickly, this is a compliance tool that you do not have to use. However, it's something that we do offer all the people that we work with, founders and clients. So it's simply a compliance tool that sort of helps you during the year. So the RTech sessions, we try to, so you're not doing this retroactively at the end of the year trying to collect information. You're doing it contemporaneously, right, as the work is being done. So again, that can be through the interview process or our compliance tool called Alibi, which will help you. It sort of works in the background and collects information automatically on your behalf.
So RTEC stands for real-time evidence collection. Contemporaneous documentation, as Darren mentioned, is an essential part of being compliant for the program. So we work with our clients throughout the year on an official or unofficial basis to help them be compliant and track contemporaneously. The last slide that we want to show you before we wrap up is just something that has to do with the actual results we've seen now with the DMZ founders. So as Sweeney mentioned, it's been all good news so far. 100% accepted as filed, dollar for dollar, submission for submission. So every company that we have assisted in the process has realized the benefit in full, to the extent that approximately $300,000 has been awarded to DMZ founders through our submissions since the inception of the PIR program, which is still relatively young, okay? Now, here are 4 examples of technological advancements that we claimed that came through the DMZ companies. So you can have a quick read of that, just because, I mean, again, these are your peers. This is what they're succeeding in, these types of submissions that we have made. So maybe those are relatable to you, but we wanted to include a couple, from your peer submissions, okay? I'll give it 5 seconds for you to read those 4 things, and then we'll move on to the last slide. Thank you, everyone, very much. Again, on behalf of Darren, myself, the rest of the Think team, we're very honored to have the opportunity to assist so many amazing companies that we've had the opportunity to, whether they were just looking for advice or they actually wanted us to make the submission for them. It's been fantastic. This past, I won't say year, but this year, albeit challenging in many ways. For us, one amazing thing to happen this year was the relationship with the DMZ. While we are very fortunate to support large companies like Capco, Auto Trader, State Street Financial, it's a real thrill to be able to work with early stage companies where we can have a huge impact. We believe anyways, and we try to go out of our way to do so. So again, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Sweeney right now. Again, check out the other PIR contributing members as well. So thank you, and we'll take any questions that you have.
Thank you, JP and Darren. That was very full of insightful little tidbits and information I'm sure that our founders will find helpful. We do have one question that came in. I think this is specifically in terms of working with ThinkShred. There might be some interest. And Joseph asked, how much does it cost, or what's the cost structure? What can a founder expect when working with ThinkShred?
So that's a really good question. Naturally, obviously, so we offer a preferred rate as a way of showing our commitment to the DMZ community and DMZ founders. So there is a preferred rate, 2-tier contingency structure to our fees. So everything we described to you today is inclusive in a contingency fee structure whereby we are compensated only when and not before the time that our clients realize the economic benefit of the solution, of the submission, excuse me. The fees exactly are 15% of the first $100,000 that you would realize and 10% of everything above and beyond that. So 15% on the first 100,000, 10% above and beyond.
And maybe just like a quick note on that. Do you know what founders are paying otherwise, like when they go out in the market and if they approach someone that may not be as suited for founders and startups? Just so our founders are obviously going to do some market research and compare.
Sure. So I will say that the lowest rates you'll find out there would be close to 10%. Okay. And on the high end, you'll see 30%. All right. 30 would be the absolute highest. The lowest you'll see will be just under 10%. Okay. Again, it's like anything else you look for. The quality will vary. Okay. Whether it's, it doesn't matter what you go for. So,
sometimes these fees too, there's some small print to them. So, well, it might be 10%. It might go up to 15 in the case of a review. So you don't get the extra support unless you sort of pay for it.
Right.
Yeah. And actually, maybe JP and Darren, you can just share this really quick, maybe in a couple of seconds. You were able to help out a founder at the DMC who had a very negative experience, unfortunately, with another ThinkShred consultant, and then you were able to help her out and get her 100% return. Am I right?
Yes, that did happen on a number of occasions. On a number of occasions. I just want to clarify one thing you said, Sweeney. You said ThinkShred. What you meant was SR&ED
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So yes, there has been a number of occasions where we've been able to go and, let's just say, get a taxpayer back on track. I mean, there's examples we've seen where there's substandard work out there. There's companies that are doing excellent work out there. So I would encourage anyone, don't take my word for it. Figure it out for yourself, right? You have a certain amount of time and you have a certain amount of effort that you're willing to investigate. Do your investigation. If you look for the least expensive price, you might unfortunately realize that you got the least for it. Certainly, I mean, our fees exceed the 15% and 10% outside of the DMZ founders. So if we were to come across you outside of that, our standard fees are higher, and that's because we take a very different approach to SR&ED in what we deliver. But again, we're very pleased to offer our preferred rate. Don't take my word for it. Qualify the people that you speak with and do your best to discern where you're going to find the best partner for you. Not everyone is for everyone. However, after 13 years of experience on the SR&ED preparer side of things, and speaking for Darren, 15 years experience on the taxpayer side of things, there's many cases where this exercise is done poorly. And I know that we have redefined how people think about SR&ED. We jokingly say all too often SR&ED is a 4-letter word, and that's how people think about it. And so do your research to the extent that you feel this is relevant to you. There is a legal right for your company to make the application. Do your best each year to ensure that every year going forward, you are positioning yourself to receive the benefit, okay? Because you wouldn't want to do a mishap and then pay the price for that in subsequent years because of a bad reputation, or you got audited or a claim denied, okay?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Let's just jump ship now into some more specifics. There was some questions around employee work that's eligible. So 2 questions. One is there a minimum number of employees that typically you would like to see, and is it more than 1 person? And then also, what are their titles, right? Is there any specific titles that are eligible? What if we have employees that are doing 2 different roles? So business analysis and researching and testing, right? So a little more specifics on the employee group. Maybe could you comment on that, Darren, JP?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So the answer to that question is, from a program perspective, you can claim, you can have an eligible claim, a viable claim, and there's no employees. Okay. From our perspective, we have not yet, and we do not intend on turning a company away because it might appear as though the submission is small. Okay. The fewer the costs, the smaller the submission. So to answer your question in 2 different ways, you can have an eligible submission with no employees. In fact, we just had an FTCAS, which is a first-time claimant advisory service meeting yesterday for a DMZ founder, and she did not have any employees in her submission. The work was done, deemed to be eligible, and it was performed only by contractors. Okay. So we were happy to help out this individual with that submission. It was accepted as filed, and yeah, so we were happy to help, and it was eligible.
Thank you. Darren,
sorry, yeah, the other part of the question. So yeah, about the roles and the title. Before I jump onto that, just one more thing I want to say about the employees. If you're an employee and you are a founder of the company, so you're a specified employee, you must take a T4 in order to get those costs recouped. If you're taking something like dividends, that won't qualify. But to answer the question about the title, so the title matters in terms of the SR&ED project. So, there's the role that you have. Let's say I mean, in this case, it was a business analyst, but you're also doing research. You might be doing testing. So your business, if someone went to LinkedIn, they might see your name and business analyst next to it. However, if you're working for a small team, you're wearing many hats. If you're doing testing or research, that would be your role when we submit the SR&ED project. So you can, the title for the SR&ED work, it's different than the role that you have on your LinkedIn profile, as an example.
Yeah, exactly. So when it comes to the SR&ED submission, everything is technically oriented, from the way it's presented to the people, to how the people are described who are contributing to the advancement.
Right, perfect. We have another question here, I think, in terms of the process. So Weiler has applied for the SR&ED credit this summer, but hasn't heard back yet. So I think just wondering, in terms of the review process by the CRA, how long does it take? How realistic are timelines? I know with COVID, some things might have moved up and down, but who would be the next point of contact, right? And how, I imagine, Weiler, you did this on your own. So maybe this is more like a general, thought on the process. How can you get in touch with How do you expedite the
Yeah,
process?
so let me just add a bit more. So I'm just trying to figure out kind of like how long should we wait for a response until we kind of go out there and do some, basically reach out to them and figure out.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for asking, Violer, and so I'll try to answer your question in an informational way as well to everyone. So I want to confirm that you have not yet received the notice of assessment for the period in question.
Well, the notice of assessment would be, so this was for our 2018 expenditures.
Okay,
And
so
yeah,
you filed for 2018 by June 30th, 2020.
correct.
Okay, and you have not yet received your notice of reassessment for that period.
No, we haven't. Yeah.
Okay. So now that I know that it was an amended tax filing, so everyone, what Violer is talking about is what we were speaking about before.
Sorry, John. Let me correct myself. I meant 2019. So yeah, for our expenses, 2019 for fiscal year end on
I was wondering
November.
about that, but anyway,
Yeah.
so okay, I take back what I was about to say. So Violer made an SR&ED submission by June 30th, the tax filing deadline for 2019, and you have not heard back from CRA. So you are certainly getting to a point where it would be longer than usual. Okay. I would be sure that somewhere you didn't miss the fact that your notice of assessment came out. Again, I'm not saying that in a judgmental way or whatever.
GP, you go to like your CRA website and then see if it's there, or they send you an email.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So if you have access to your My Business account, I mean, it's messy in there, but you will be able to find if your notice of assessment has been issued. If your notice of assessment has been issued, then they would have processed your SR&ED submission, and you could be dealing with an entirely different problem that we've seen: checks getting lost in the mail. I'm not sure if you're set up for your direct deposit. If your direct deposit is activated, then the money would have been deposited. So if you're 100% certain that you're not on direct deposit, the notice of assessment is not in there, then they would not have adjudicated this year's submission yet. Is it possible? Yes, but it is getting long for that.
Okay, so maybe it's a good time to give them a call.
Less than 2 months.
Ask those questions, I guess. Maybe it's a good time to just give them a call and just ask those questions. Hey, what are the next steps, and get a status update.
So we can take this offline, Violer, as well. Again, I'm trying to answer your question in an informational way so everyone can benefit from it. We can try to help you. You can try to help yourself. If none of the information is there, you would simply call a senior corporate agent within CRA to find out that information. So yes, but to answer your question, we typically see approvals in less than 60 days. So it's definitely getting on a little bit. If you filed before June 30th.
And CRA has a service standard that says you would get an answer back within 60 days, and they meet that service standard at least 93% of the time. So you could be an outlier, or something else might be going on. But there's other strategies too. If you want to take this online in terms of reaching out to CRA and when, we can certainly answer some additional questions around that.
And that's 60 days?
Yeah.
2 months?
60, that's right. Yes, 60 days.
Yeah. So to close Darren's thought there, there's no penalties CRA face if they don't adjudicate the claim in a certain amount of time. It's simply a service standard that they try to make, and as he mentioned, 93% of the time they do meet that service standard of 60 days. But we've seen as quick as 3 days the notice of assessment came out. We've also seen 8-9 months.
Yeah, it's not like a free pizza if they don't come back in time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So we're happy to continue answering questions.
Thank you both, and Darren. That was very, very informative. Sorry, guys. I have a little bit of a lag going on my side.
That's right. It's easy. Yeah. So really, again, this was scheduled for an hour. We've done our best to throw as much at you as we can in a relatable way. We're still under the hour mark, but reach out to us. I mean, I'll stick around here until you guys are done. I blocked off a considerable amount of time just to be here for you. So as long as questions come, we'll continue to answer them, but we understand that people have to go. So if it's now or later, We are here to support you in an advisory capacity as required to execute work if you need it, if you feel inspired by what we've said to you. But we do take a great deal of pride in supporting the DMZ community, and we're grateful for that opportunity. So just let us know how we can help.
Thank you both, JP and Darren, for your time. Thank you everyone for attending. There's multiple ways you can get in touch with JP and Darren. They are on the Slack channel. So if you're a DMZ founder, JP and Darren are both on Slack. If you want to DM them, ask a quick question, they're on the Ask a Professional channel. You can also log on to our portal. So if you're a current DMZ member, you can book one-on-one meetings directly in Calendly. And then finally, you know, his email is there as well, johnpaul@thinksrned.com. So you can email JP directly as well with any questions. Plus, you can just get in touch with me. I'm on Slack. My email is also sweeney@ryerson.ca. So many ways to get in touch. We don't want to leave you guys high and dry. Thank you so much for joining. Everyone, if you have any more questions, again, reach out after the webinar. Thank you. Have a wonderful, fantastic day, and hope you found this information useful. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.